So you've got all these different, why did George W. Bush, they want to know why he signed an executive order for the United States military to be involved in a war with Afghanistan on September the 9th, 2 days before the attacks. So there's just some we can't know the answer to the questions, but there were some really big questions that families had to ask, and the government just ignored it. I mean, one of the things I will say too is that you've got people like Abu Zubaydah, who was detained, I think, in Guantanamo. He was waterboarded 83 times, slammed against a concrete wall multiple times, and he finally, after that torture, made all kinds of confessions about the planning and financing and orchestrating of the attacks, and that populates much of chapters 5, 6, and 7 in the 9/11 Commission report. And then many years later, other people in the government said, well, actually, Zubaydah had nothing to do with Al-Qaeda, nothing to do with any of this. So you've got 3 chapters in a report that are based on testimony of somebody years later who said to have known nothing about it. So it really gives families, a lot of questions about deception and a cover-up.
Can I ask
yes.
Kind of relate to the what is the basic premise of your book? That the government covered up Saudi Arabian interest in this? What's the basic premise so I can catch up? Please.
Okay. So the basic premise is to chronicle the story of the families who began with grief, who went to Washington, D.C. to get an investigation, and then to chronicle how they try to keep the commission on track. And then what I do is I showcase some of the questions that are still left unanswered. And then I have to be honest about, if the dozen family members were a jury, they were never a jury in a court, but if they were today, they would be a hung jury. Because I have to talk about, here are the families that have accepted the official account. Here are a bunch of other families who think that there's a cover-up, a deception. And
what's the cover-up? What's the cover-up? Maybe that'll make it easier for us to understand.
Yeah. Well, there'd be many families that there's a cover-up regarding Saudi Arabia's involvement.
Yes.
That would
very
be
much so.
One. I mean, it would be easy if I could say there's one cover-up or one thing that goes in one direction, but it goes in a variety of directions, which I can't answer because a proper investigation would find out. Did people sit on their hands? It seemed that there were a dozen or 14 different countries' intelligence agencies giving the White House and the Pentagon the heads up regarding attacks coming in the summer, even the spring of 2001. But it seems that at every turn, people looked the other way. You've got the CIA director, I think about nearly 10 times, when there are agents in the field saying, we think that we can apprehend Osama bin Laden regarding the SS Cole. He would scuttle those attempts to apprehend the man. So there's just a lot of things.
Why do you think that they're doing that?
Well, that would be why when you were in charge of countering terrorism in the CIA, that's one of the things you've got other people as well doing that in different departments. But if that's one of your chief objectives, why would you want to set things in motion, hire agents that are supposed to go and find out if there are terrorist threats to America? And then when your agents, who are the best of the best, who are supposed to say, we need to arrest this person, bin Laden was wanted on the USS Cole, embassies in Kenya and Tanzania, and then the CIA director saying, no, not now, I could have to speculate, but what can explain that? I mean, a lapse in judgment? I
Well,
I mean,
there are a lot of government officials and FBI officials who are really dumb about this whole thing. I mean, we'll all concede that.
yeah.
But I think they did it because for reasons other than just plain being stupid and not seeing the tea leaves. Is
Well,
that what you're saying?
I'm not part of the Bush cabinet, but Paul O'Neill, who was the Treasury Secretary, was. And he's in his Price of Loyalty memoir that came out in 2004. He said that in the first cabinet meetings in January of 2001, President Bush basically said, I want to find a way to get into Iraq, find a way to do it.
Yep.
You don't have to actually tell me. Now, I mean, without having people going to have a proper investigation who testify under oath, etc., then you can't know.
But I thought those that came before the commission were under oath.
Oh, many were not. I mean, a letter that went from many of the family members on this committee to Senator Patrick Leahy in 2009 said, I'll quote, "At the 9/11 Commission's hearings, little actual evidence was ever produced. Many individuals were not sworn in. Critical witnesses were either not called to testify."
I'm sorry, I covered those. So, and again, if I read the report,
Yeah.
in fact, I still have a copy of the report.
Yeah.
So again, I'd like to back up and let's be clear. You're saying, if I hear you correctly, that they didn't go deep enough to find out where the origins of the terrorist attack. Am I hearing you correctly, or am I reading too much?
Yeah, I think they didn't go. I mean, the families would want people to be sworn in that were not sworn in.
Well, who? Can you give us one?
Well, I mean, you've got President Bush and Vice President Cheney, who spoke behind closed doors, not under oath.
Yep.
And no record of the transcript. I mean, there's no transcript.
So what were they attempting to do, or what were they hiding? I mean, they went into Iraq eventually. They went into eventually they caught most of the conspirators. What did they not do?
Well, I mean,
I'm trying. Unfortunately, I come from a different angle from this, so and maybe I'm being too. I'm just trying to hear what they should have done that you think in your book they did not do, and the families.
Okay, I think for the families, I mean, I think one of the largest ones from many families would agree that they think that you got 15 of 19 hijackers from Saudi Arabia. You have freedom of information that's come out regarding FBI with CIA people. I mean, two of the people who were hijackers were recruited by the CIA, and that came out this spring.
Well, and I believe, Ray, wasn't there something passed where the 9/11 families weren't able to sue Saudi Arabia or something? I remember reading that or
Yes.
hearing about that.
Yeah, I mean,
and it's like, that's kind of fishy to me. They passed that, and it's like, well, if Saudi Arabia didn't really have anything to do with it, why would they pass anything like that? It is so strange. We have got Ray McGinnis with us today.
Why, but,
Unanswered questions is the latest from him. But Don, go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No. We have our guests. I'm sorry to be so. I'm really trying. I'm sorry I didn't read the book beforehand. That's my fault. I apologize. But I'm just trying. I've done 4 or 5 stories on the families and I know three of the people that died in the towers. So over the years, I've seen a lot. But I'm trying to hear from you what do you think the Saudi Arabians are involved? The government of Saudi Arabia is involved?
I think that there is a compelling case that they could be involved, and I can say that, I mean, whether it's Terry Strata's group or September 11th Families for Peaceful Tomorrows, there's quite a number of family groups that believe that there's a compelling case to suggest that Saudi Arabia is involved, and they're trying to have a lawsuit for billions of dollars against them. I mean, for me, as a chronicler, I could only write what seemed to be, what's there in the press releases of family groups over the years. If the families were saying over the years, we don't think Saudi Arabia is involved at all, I couldn't suggest that that Saudi Arabia might be, because there'd be all kinds of family members reading my book saying, how dare you say that? So I had to simply reflect what they've been saying up until very recently. I mean, maybe they're wrong. Maybe when the Saudi Arabian officials say, maybe that's the truth, but maybe it's not the truth. And it's part of the lingering doubts that
Well, I asked you a question. Did you investigate who set up these groups? Did you who's put up the money for these groups, and who continues? Because I think you will find in most of the cases, it's a group of lawyers. One group in Portland, Oregon, I know of because I did a story on it, that has pulled together 55 families, and is one of the groups. And I'm sorry, off the top of my head, I can't tell you which group it is. But have you looked at which groups are legitimate survivors and which ones are lawyers who have filed suit or attempted to file suit?
Yeah, I'm quite familiar with the groups. The groups that I'm interested in are the ones that were most closely involved in this. There aren't
Are the closely involved or most vocal?
Well, most involved. I mean, the people who were sitting through the whole 9/11 Commission, in the commission hearings, providing questions for the 9/11 commissioners, who thanked these families in person many times before the press for their good questions, which they mostly ignored.
Have you parsed the questions to find out which ones fit into the investigation, or which, again, I've sat through a few investigations, and people always proffer a lot of questions, but some of them don't. And again, I want to say I apologize for being somewhat of a naysayer, is because I thought the report was redacted, because I thought there was a lot of information that was and still is secret, but it's supposed to be released in 28, or 27 or 28. I think 28. I think is in the year 28. Most of the records are going to be released.
Yeah, and I think that you're certainly right. Certainly, a lot of the information in the endnotes is not available for people to see, and maybe there will be much more that will come out in a number of years, and I think that the family steering committee for the 9/11 Independent Commission was family members only. There's no lawyers involved in this. The groups like Voices of September 11th with Mary Fetchett and Beverly Eckert and Carol Ashley and Bill Harvey, they're family members in Connecticut. Families skyscraper safety campaign with Monica.
Well, can you give us one question that the commission should have asked that was not asked?
Well, one question was, why weren't NORAD jets able to intercept the hijacked planes if they were airborne within 8 minutes of notification. I think that there was conflicting testimony around things like that, around readiness to respond, that the families just continue to have, they wanted to make the nation safe. And it seemed that over and over again, people were saying they didn't know how to do this or that protocol. We've got stories of certain people, instead of responding, they worked on some paperwork sitting in their pilot's position on the tarmac somewhere. So I think that for some families, the issue is more about incompetence, which is different than
You're right. There was a lot of incompetence.
And what I've written more is to chronicle a story, because as I said maybe before you came on, if the dozen members of the Family Steering Committee for the Independent 9/11 Commission, who really got the commission to happen, were to meet today, and if they were constituted as a jury in a court of law, it would be a hung jury, because they're divided. They're not all of one mind regarding accepting the official account, or whether there's some cover up in some direction, Saudi Arabia or something else. Some who want a new investigation, others who want to just say, let's move on. And so my intention was simply to chronicle the story, to highlight that it's an important story of grassroots advocacy. And here are some people who, instead of deciding after a devastating loss to go off and have their private lives, went to Washington, D.C. to try and get government officials to have a proper account of what happened. So I think it's an important story, and I think it's one that people, I think they could be more familiar with than they are. Certainly up in Canada, I talk about it, and people look at me like they don't know, they have no idea who Kristen Breitweiser is, or Patty Casazza, or Monica Gabrielle, or Sally Reaganhart. I think that this is a compelling story.
Well, when you put on that basis, there's absolutely no doubt that you're providing a very public service. But my argument is trying to get the government to do anything, as the senators find out when in the hearings, is almost impossible. But if you put your book in that context, I couldn't agree with you more. It's a necessary book. Thank you for doing it.
Yeah, and I had to be. I mean, if it was the case that all the family members who were monitoring the 9/11 Commission and the groups that sprung up, right after, in the fall and winter of 2001 and 2002, all had one message for the world to hear, I would have had to chronicle that, because any family member could happen upon my book in a bookstore, and I know that I have to reflect what the chronicle, what the press releases have said. They don't all agree, and so I had to tell the story and say, here is a range of opinions, which reflects the range of opinions of Americans as well. I think that when it comes to where they are all these years later, there are some families who are very involved in the creation of the new towers at Ground Zero, and there are other families that I've been in touch with who don't want to go anywhere near that. They don't want to go and see the museum or anything. So, and people have their different reasons, emotional and whatever. But it's an interesting, it's interesting to think about people's response. I think that often, if you have a devastating loss, there's an inclination to just simply want to grieve and then move on and have a private life and not talk about it much. Certainly not to the press, and certainly not to phone a member of Congress or go and meet in person with a senator. So it's a different, perhaps it's a different kind of family member who ends up emerging. I mean, you've got people like Carrie Lemack who who was involved in a documentary in 2010, I think it was. It got a nomination for documentary short called "Killing in the Name," which is about Islamic terrorism. So it's a range of people that I had to write about, and I had to really leave it at that. If anything, what I do in terms of saying what is my basic premise is that there's a story here for us to get familiar with, but I really leave the reader in a position where it's almost like if you were a 9/11 commissioner and you read my book, what would you think? Because I can't tell people it's this thing or that thing, because there's a variety of perspectives that are all there, that are all part of the public record.
I couldn't agree with you more. It sounds like you did a great reporting job. I just have to tell you, that morning we were going in, my wife and I, to sign the documents for on a venture we were on, and we were going into New York for a 2:00 meeting at one of the towers. Just so you know.
Yeah. Well,
and all we saw as we were driving down the New Jersey Turnpike was the smoke coming from one of the towers. So, every time I hear this story, I get a little goosebump.
That little bit of hair on the back of your neck or whatever. I mean, I have friends. I've got friends in Vancouver who just happened to. They were going to have a meeting in the Twin Towers on the 11th, but their meeting got changed. It got postponed. So of course they never had a meeting because there's no building to meet in. But
and we never got the financing. So but let's back up a moment. You say a jury would be 50-50. After your book and talking as much as you have, what's your opinion? Is there something there or not?
Well, there are questions that are around. When it comes to Saudi Arabia and the 15 hijackers, and you've got, as I understand it, a State Department, an embassy who have a certain procedure regarding how they vet people who come with a visa to America. And you've got a process where people are supposed to fill out the forms. And it seems that there were people in the CIA office adjacent in Saudi Arabia to the U.S. Embassy that leaned on the embassy to really fast track things. And so you have people who came to America filling out, like, what year were you born? Answer, 1878. What will you be doing in America? No. So you've got all of these incomplete forms, all kinds of things that are just really puzzling in their incompetence, I can't know I can read Paul O'Neill's, Treasury Secretary Paul O'Neill's book, The Price of Loyalty, and how he talks about how President Bush wanted some way to get into Iraq, and find me a way. That's quoting Paul O'Neill. Maybe he's misremembering what the president said in January 2001 in the cabinet meeting, but that's his contention. And so, are there people in positions of power when something is bubbling or brewing, make decisions to look the other way? I don't know. Maybe, hopefully not. But
throughout history.
Yeah, throughout history. But I know that it happens in Canada. we have scandals, and sometimes people show up a bit late. It's awful to think if there are people who, and I'm not talking about orchestrating things, but I'm just saying slow walking their response, or I don't know what. But anyway, that is my sense of how numbers of families still have this niggling niggling feeling that just, Kristen, not Mindy Kleinberg, whose husband Alan died. She testified to the 9/11 Commission. I don't know if you were there, you might have even heard her testimony in late March of 2003, and she talked about how many protocols were broken in just every single sector, the FAA, the CIA, the FBI, and so on. And you could say, she says, you could talk about how the hijackers were lucky, but they were lucky over and over and over and over. And so it raises other questions, which families, the families who would wish, I don't know if at this point, if it's the case anymore, would have wished that there could have been a new investigation. There were several groups in New York City for a while trying to do that in the 2000s. But they never wanted to say anything more than, we think that we haven't been told the whole story. They didn't want to say things in public, and I can't, I don't know what people's private thoughts.
There's no question that the whole story hasn't been told.
Yeah.
I'm only hope I'm around in 28 when they release that, because I'd like to see it.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
Ray, before we let you go, how do we get your book and everything that you're doing?
Well, you can get the book at Amazon, Unanswered Questions, What the September 11th Families Asked and the 9/11 Commission Ignored. Go to Amazon.com if you want the ebook or a paperback, or just go to your local bookstore and order the paperback or the hardcover.
Fantastic.
And you can follow me on Twitter. I'm on Twitter as well. What is my Twitter handle? It's I should know this, right? I'm at Ray McGinnis, RAYMCGINNIS, digit 7.
Fantastic. Well, Ray, I really appreciate the time.
I gave you a hard time, but I will tell you, I'm going to go
Your
out.
call has been forwarded to an automatic voice message system.
Okay, apparently Josh Bernstein is not going to join us, so that's fine.
069 is not available.
I tried to get
At the
rid
tone,
of
please record your message.
the phone there.
When you have finished
Okay.
recording, you may hang up.
I don't know
or
what the
press
hell
1
is
for
going
more
on here.
options.
Okay, Josh, I got your voicemail, so I guess just give me a call back when you can here.
I'm just going to say I was going to
Go ahead, Don.
I'm going to go out and buy his book.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I've tried to.
I think you've done a terrific job of reporting, and that's the highest compliment I can give you.
Well, thank you. And and I think that there are many people who are well satisfied or have come to peace. When I think what I had to do as I wrote the book, was to try and think about, what would Mary Fetchett say if she read my book? She's really upset about the lack of response for evacuations in the towers. That's a whole different issue. But she's satisfied with the account. So I had to think about what all these families would say if they read my book. So I hope they'll like it when they see it. And thank you.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm looking forward to more from you. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for chatting with us today, Ray. I really appreciate it.
Great. Thanks so much, James. Bye-bye.
Definitely. There he goes. That's Ray McGinnis, and Don Mazzella, of course, still with us. I was trying to reach Josh Bernstein, but he, of course, is nowhere to be found. But Don, what do you make of the